Imagine an island with gorgeous white beaches, idyllic palm landscapes and tropical jungle. Pretty tempting, isn't it? But if you dare to set foot on this island, you can expect certain death. The island is considered one of the most dangerous islands in the world, with one of the most isolated tribes on Earth. And this tribe wants to continue to spend its future without influence of the modern world, which is why the island is defended at all costs. Numerous tourists have already had to pay for this with their lives. But what is it about this mysterious island? Which people live there and why do they defend their island to the death? We look at all of these questions in today's video. Enjoy! The island we're going to look at today is called North Sentinel Island and it belongs to the Andaman Archipelago. This collection of islands is located in the Indian Ocean, about 300 kilometers off the coast of Myanmar. Politically, however, they belong to India, which is much further away. But this does not mean that India has the actual sovereignty over all islands. On the contrary, Indian citizens are even forbidden to enter some of the islands as they are considered too dangerous. But no other island surpasses North Sentinel Island. But who exactly lives there? The indigenous people there are called Sentinelese and are the oldest class of people in all of South Asia. They populated the island as early as about 60,000 BC and are considered the closest descendants of our ancestors in Africa. Thus, customs and traditions of the prehistoric people are still maintained there, since there was no contact with the outside world for almost 60,000 years. In fact, however, we know very little about the people living there, as it is very difficult to establish contact. A first documented approach took place in 1867 when an Indian merchant ship ran onto a reef and was completely destroyed. The crew fled to the island, but it quickly became clear that the Sentinelese people are not necessarily known for their hospitality. The castaways were immediately attacked and the Royal Navy rescue team was only able to recover some alive. The story spread throughout the British Empire and the island quickly became known as one of the most dangerous in the world. But the British wanted to colonize the island, so they launched further contacts. So in a rather barbaric act, they kidnapped a couple and some children to civilize them. But the couple promptly died of disease, so they sent the children back. But they too had already been infected by the Western diseases and were now bringing them to the island. But a large part of the tribe survived this epidemic. But here the deep hatred for the foreign civilization could have originated. And the British also gave up trying to colonize the islands. And new expeditions were not made until the Indian independence. Indian explorers as well as extreme adventurers visited the island from time to time. Even though many of these visits ended fatally for the invaders, there were also peaceful approaches. For example, an Indian anthropologist and his team were able to make friendly contact with some of the inhabitants. They entered the island with plenty of coconuts and other gifts. And so he was able to spend a few days exploring the culture there, but it was made clear to him that staying too long would also be fatal for him. From this research, we know that the indigenous people live as hunter-gatherers and their way of life is very similar to that of African prehistoric people. But in fact, the language, religion and much of the customs remain a mystery to this day. And since most of the approaches continued to be fatal, the Indian government forbade entering the island and approaching closer than 5 nautical miles, so that future contacts were also denied. Only every 10 years a ship of the Indian Navy approaches for the census, whereby this looks like throwing a few coconuts on the beach and seeing how many people show up afterwards. So it is estimated that between 40 and 500 people live on the island. So you can see it's not really an accurate census. The attitude of the sentinels towards intruders remain the same and cruel news from the island reaches us again and again. In 2006, for example, 2 Indian crab fishermen washed up on the island and both were promptly killed. When a helicopter flew over the island during the 2004 tsunami, it was attacked with bows and arrows. And in 2018, a Christian missionary from Missouri entered the island, feeling compelled to convert the inhabitants. But the last thing found of him was a diary entry, "I do not want to die." So despite the beautiful tropical idyll, you should book your next beach adventure somewhere else. The island remains a true mystery and one of the last unexplored places in the midst of our globalized world. If you're more interested in dangerous islands, I also recommend you my video about the most remote island of the world. Just click here and see you there.